is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Juliet Mann. Our top stories this hour. Let us join NATO. Ukraine's former president calls for fast-track membership to the defence bloc amid escalating tension with Russia. Djokovic loses his match with Australia. The world's tennis #1 is deported, missing the Australian Open. Tsunami warnings around the world. An underwater volcano sends water surging ashore as far away as Peru. And how these lion dancers plan to get the Year of the Tiger off to a roaring start. The former president of Ukraine has called for the country's membership of NATO to be accelerated as Kiev seeks to avoid a full-blown military conflict with Russia. Speaking on a trip to Poland, Petro Poroshenko claimed that both Ukraine and Georgia should make membership of the defence bloc a priority, adding that his country has been at war with Russia since 2014, when the Crimea Peninsula was annexed in a surprise incursion by Moscow. Well, let's join Guy Henderson. He's in Kyiv for us. Good to see you, Guy. Look, NATO membership is pretty much the red line as Moscow's concerned. So what exactly has Poroshenko been saying?
Well, in the past, there's been powerful actors, powerful European countries who've opposed the idea of rapid membership of Ukraine to NATO on the grounds that it might be seen provocative in Moscow. However, what Petro Poroshenko, the former president of Ukraine and opposition leader, is saying is effectively that hasn't worked. Russia is still acting, in his view, aggressively on Ukraine's borders at the moment, and that perhaps then one solution to try and maybe force a strategic rethink could be to try and speed up Ukraine's membership to NATO. Here is a little bit of what he said in that press conference in Warsaw.
Our first request is membership action plan in NATO, because what Putin put forward, the ultimatum that NATO should present to Russia, the guarantees for not expanding their territory, which is absolutely illegal, absolutely against the international law, against the decision of the summit here 2008 in Bucharest. We definitely need to be the right answer for Putin would be presented to Ukraine in the summit this year in Madrid, on the NATO summit, membership action plan for Ukraine and for Georgia.
He also linked that more rapid accession towards NATO to some of his own domestic woes. Poroshenko will return to Ukraine in a number of hours, actually, to appear in court on Monday, charged with high treason. And his view is that those are politically motivated charges, and he thinks that if Ukraine were to start speeding up its accession process towards Western institutions, that perhaps that might add momentum to the idea of reforms to things like the judicial system, which might make those kind of charges much harder to bring forward. Of course, that is not the state's version of events. As far as they're concerned, he allegedly colluded with Eastern separatists back in 2014, and that is why he is appearing in court on Monday on those charges.
Be interesting to see how that unfolds. But meanwhile, it does seem that Ukraine is bracing itself for what some are calling a make-or-break week ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I mean, since Friday, we've had US officials certainly warning that, in their view, Russia is now kind of preparing the ground, setting the stage for an escalation for potential war. We had a cyber attack on several government. There were cyber attacks on several government ministries on Friday morning. Microsoft, which is the company that oversees some of the operations, the IT systems in those government ministries, is now saying that that attack might be more severe than perhaps was initially suspected. We'll have to find out more information on that. and then we had those US claims that perhaps Russia might be preparing to carry out operations potentially against its own side, to then blame it on Ukraine and give them an excuse to escalate things. However, we interviewed the Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine on Friday, and she seemed to think that last week's talks were about showing unity between Western countries, which she said did happen, and were about finding out and working out whether there might be any channels of communication and way to move dialogue forward from here. Next week, she said, would be more pivotal, though, because that is when we would find out whether Russia is prepared to continue dialogue along any of those avenues, or whether it was going to cut things off, and we would then potentially head towards a conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
So potentially a pivotal week ahead. Guy Henderson in Kiev, thank you. This year's Australian Open will not include the defending men's champion. World #1 tennis player Novak Djokovic has been deported from Australia after the country's government cancelled his visa over concerns about his vaccination status. Greg Navarro has the story.
God is with us.
The prayers and chants outside a federal court in Melbourne weren't enough to make Serbian native Ivan Sukanic optimistic about his favourite tennis player's future in Australia.
You know, when I saw the politicians put their hands in, I lost the faith.
A short time later, a federal court judge confirmed what Sukanic feared.
The orders of the court are, 1, the amended application be dismissed with costs.
That Novak Djokovic's legal bid to have his visa reinstated and remain in Australia was over. The Australian Open defending men's champion to be deported just hours before the tournament began.
For me, Djokovic is a winner. You know, he's a free man. He's free man. They can put him in a detention center whenever they want. You know, for me, he's a free man.
In a statement, Djokovic said he was disappointed with the ruling. For dozens of supporters, the end to a high-profile bid to keep the unvaccinated player from participating in the Australian Open tough to swallow.
It's honestly, I lost everything. Kind of like when you have eat the food and not taste.
Many of Djokovic's supporters who waited outside the federal court here in Melbourne point out that the Serbian tennis star didn't come to Australia with the intention of not following the rules that were set out. Although all players and staff at this year's Open must be vaccinated to attend, Djokovic applied for and received a medical exemption to participate because he had contracted COVID last month. But Djokovic was detained when he arrived, and the government cancelled his visa because he wasn't vaccinated.
The rules were there is exemption. Yeah? He got this exemption, and that's it.
A federal court judge reinstated that visa, but Australia's immigration minister cancelled the visa a second time on health and good order grounds. Djokovic misled Australian authorities on his entry declaration relating to overseas travel in the prior 2 weeks, and he acknowledged that he took part in an interview with a French journalist while he was infected with COVID-19 last month.
It's very clear that Novak Djokovic is one of the best players of the history, without a doubt. But there is no one player in history that's more important than an event.
Djokovic's deportation means that he not only misses this year's Australian Open, but he could also be banned from returning to Australia for up to 3 years. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Melbourne.
Well, there was outrage in Serbia at the news of Djokovic's deportation, with the country's president accusing the Australian government of conducting a political witch hunt against the champion. Many Serbs reacted with the same fury.
I wish him a long and healthy life, and may he never give up, as he hasn't done so far. I offer heartfelt support.
It is shameful. What else to say? And it is politics. It has nothing to do with health. It's just politics.
It is injustice, a huge injustice. He helped Australia during the bushfires when Sava flooded here, to Italians at the beginning of the corona. He gave millions, and today, what do you think if it was Nadal? Everybody would jump to help him. But Djokovic, nothing.
Serbs are heading to the polls Sunday to decide on amendments to the constitution that could change how judges and prosecutors are elected in the country. The government says the changes would make the judiciary more independent and improve its chances of gaining European Union membership. But some critics disagree, and as Alyosha Milenkovic reports, few Serbs seem to even care.
With the Orthodox Christmas and New Year just passed, the holiday spirit is still very much present in the streets of Belgrade. What isn't present is any political campaigning, billboards or activists trying to motivate people to go to the polls on Sunday. The only opposition MP in the current Serbian parliament warns that general apathy towards this referendum could cost the nation dearly if the amendments pass. Vladan Glišić is self-isolating as he tested positive for COVID-19.
With these changes of the Constitution, we separate the judiciary from the possibility for our citizens to decide about our judicial system. Until now, the Parliament was appointing judges and prosecutors, but now they'll be isolated from the legislative and people's power, and they'll elect themselves.
This is the Serbian Parliament building, where Glišić fights his political battles against the overwhelming majority. The opposition boycotted the previous elections in Serbia, so now the ruling coalition can push any bill with ease through the parliament. But in the case of these constitutional changes, they also have the full support of the Judges Association of Serbia. Their president dismisses claims that the parliament and the people won't be able to control the judiciary after the referendum.
The Parliament won't be stripped of rights to influence the judiciary because they would adopt the laws under which the judiciary would work. They'll form the courts, adopt the laws regulating the procedural framework. The courts and the prosecutors will follow those rules created by Parliament.
Justice Boljević also stressed that the changes do not purely follow Venice Commission guidelines, but they're custom-made for Serbia. In recent months, the country has been gripped by widespread protests against the proposed constitutional changes and an expropriation law that would have made it easier for the state to claim private lands. Separately, the parliament voted to scrap a measure that required a minimum number of voters to participate in a referendum, which means imported measures, like Sundays, will be decided even if voter turnout is minimal. There are heated opinions from both sides about the constitutional changes. But what's missing in the equation are the voters. According to some opinion polls, more than half of them have absolutely no opinion about the matter. Aljoša Milenković, CGTN, Belgrade.
4 people who were held hostage at a synagogue in the U.S. state of Texas have been freed unharmed. A rescue team stormed the synagogue after a 10-hour standoff in the city of Dallas. Shortly before, explosions and gunfire were heard. The 4 hostages, who included a rabbi, were freed. The gunman died, although the circumstances around his death are not known. Somalia's government spokesperson has been wounded in an explosion in the capital Mogadishu. According to state-run media, a suicide bomber set off the blast at a road junction targeting Mohammed Ibrahim Moalimu. He was a former BBC journalist and he was rushed to hospital and is in a stable condition. Al-Shabaab fighters have claimed responsibility for the attack. Still ahead on CGTN, monthly fines for failing to get a COVID jab. How Greece's seniors are being encouraged to protect themselves.
Beijing, China's capital and its cultural nerve center. A modern metropolis with traditional roots. And now it becomes the first city in the world to host both Summer and Winter Olympics. After 14 years, the biggest sporting extravaganza returns to Beijing. Thousands of athletes from around the globe will compete in over 100 events at 3 zones. Cheered on by over 1.4 billion Chinese citizens and millions abroad. CGTN will bring you a ringside view of the historic event. 2022 Beijing Olympics, the games that matter on CGTN. See the difference.
Coming up on this week's Razor, we meet the British family who are leading the way in sustainable mussel farming, which can not only help feed growing populations, but also help the environment in the process.
You can grow trees or seaweed or whatever else you want that takes carbon out of the atmosphere, but it releases it pretty quickly. With mussel shells or any other bivalve shell, it's millions of years, so we're taking it out of circulation.
Welcome back. Reminder of our main story. Let us join NATO. Ukraine's former president calls for fast-track membership to the defence bloc amid escalating tension with Russia. And Djokovic loses his match with Australia. The world's tennis #1 is deported, missing the Australian Open. Scientists say the threat of a tsunami in the Pacific is receding. Many parts of the region, from the US to Japan, issued warnings and evacuated coastal areas after an underwater volcano erupted near Tonga. Luigi Barkle reports.
These are the shores of Peru on the west coast of South America. Like much of the Pacific, a tsunami warning has been triggered here. Beaches in many coastal towns and cities like Pisco were evacuated, but still the water proving too strong.
I didn't notice the first wave. During the second one, people started moving more towards the shore. It was with the third wave that it reached the wall. And on the fourth, everything got flooded and the water reached right up to my knees.
The cause of the warnings was almost 11,000 kilometers away, a volcano erupting underwater around 60 kilometers from the small Pacific island of Tonga. The explosion on Saturday sent smoke in the air some 12 miles above sea level. So far, there have been no deaths or injuries reported in Tonga, but communication lines remain down, so that could change. Nearby New Zealand says it's offered help.
Anything that may be required that Tonga seeks from us in terms of assistance, we are ready to provide as required. But at the moment, very much working to establish what's needed. A clear indication that has come from Tonga is the need for water. The ash cloud has, as you can imagine, caused contamination. That's on top of already a challenging environment in terms of water supply, and so that's what the Defence Force are very focused on.
Tsunami warnings were also issued in Japan and the United States, where beaches on the west coast, including California, were evacuated. Hawaii and Alaska were put on alert. On Sunday, US officials said the tsunami threat in the Pacific was receding, but the fact that the eruption could be felt so far away was both humbling and scary. Luigi Barkle, CGTN.
In Greece, people over the age of 60 are facing monthly fines for failure to get a COVID vaccination. Levies collected from the fines will help fund hospitals fighting the pandemic. Like much of Europe, Greece has seen daily cases hit record highs this month as the highly contagious Omicron variant spreads. CGTN's Evangelos Sipsos is in Athens for us. Evangelo, good to see you again this evening. Tell us a little bit more about these fines for the unvaccinated over 60s and how it's going to work.
Well, the vaccination deadline for those who are over the age of 60 expires today, and the government is saying that there will be no extension. Now, this means that those people who are over the age of 60 and are unvaccinated will have to pay a fine of $114 per month. But because this fine is happening in the mid of January, just for the half of the month, they will have to pay half of that amount, which is $57. Now, how does the government do that? They final cross-check people's social security numbers and tax IDs for those who are over 60 and unvaccinated, write up a list with their names and send out those fines. Those fines, of course, will not be sent in their mailbox and have to go to some government office to pay them, but instead they will be collected at the end of the year once the individuals will have to file the yearly income taxes. Now, there are people who are exempt from the fine, and those are Greeks who live in another country, people who are exempt of getting the vaccination because of health reasons, people who got the jab in another country, and people who have already booked the appointment to get at least their first jab. The Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis is urging those who are over the age of 60 to get the jab. He even went on national television last night pleading for them to go and do it as soon as possible.
Evangelo, Greece has seen record levels of COVID cases this month. I know this is the same across many parts of Europe, but how are Greek hospitals coping?
Well, the Greek government has extended the measures that were imposed since the beginning of the year, and that's because hospitals right now are experiencing a lot of pressure. According to government sources and health officials, they're saying they're currently suffocating because of the increase of cases and admissions every day. Just in the last 24 hours, more than 18,000 confirmed cases and 700 people have been admitted to ICUs and ventilators, with 80 people losing their lives. The majority of these people are over the age of 60 and unvaccinated. In Greece's second largest city, in Thessaloniki, the government ordered more than 200 private doctors to assist and help public hospitals because of the pressure they're receiving. Since the beginning of the pandemic here in Greece, there have been more than 1.6 million confirmed cases, and more than 21,000 people have lost their lives because of the pandemic.
Evangelos Sipsas in Athens, thank you for that update. Well, Beijing has reported its first locally transmitted case of the Omicron variant of COVID. It comes as the Chinese capital finalises preparations to host the Winter Olympic Games, which start in 3 weeks. Locally transmitted Omicron cases have also been reported in at least 4 other provinces and municipalities. Thousands of teenagers across the UK will be able to get their booster jabs from Monday as the country expands its third dose rollout to 16 and 17-year-olds. Until now, booster jabs were only offered to kids those age who were deemed clinically vulnerable. Well, the decision to expand comes after data showed 2 doses were not enough to protect people from becoming ill with the Omicron variant. Countries around the world are making their final preparations ahead of the Beijing Winter Olympic Games, and that includes nations that don't have a strong track record in winter sports. Mexico is sending 4 athletes, biggest skater to represent the country in 30 years. CGTN's Alistair Baverstock reports from Mexico City.
As countries from around the world prepare for the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympic Games, Mexico has its eyes on the podium. The country has never won a medal at the Winter Games, and for the Mexican Olympic Committee Vice President, Daniel Aceves, it would be a source of pride and prestige.
Mexico needs representatives on the international stage in all areas, and sporting prowess influences how a country is perceived. So a medal would show discipline and commitment from a country without the climate for more common practice of winter sports.
Beijing 2022 will be Mexico's 11th showing at a Winter Games.
Despite not being a country typically associated with winter sports, Mexico is nevertheless sending 4 athletes to Beijing 2022. The delegation is made up of 1 cross-country skier, 2 alpine skiers, and the best figure skater the country has produced in a generation.
That figure skater is 22-year-old Donovan Carrillo, a prodigy who will carry the flag for Mexico at the opening ceremony. The Guadalajara native is the first Mexican figure skater to represent his country at a Winter Olympics in 30 years.
Being the first Mexican to qualify for the Beijing Olympics makes me very proud. These Olympic Games in Beijing 2022 have been a beacon of hope. It relieves a lot of the uncertainty we have lived through during the pandemic.
That's a sentiment shared by Donovan's governing Olympic committee.
Mexico has observed the efforts of China's Olympic organization as part of society's response to the pandemic. We know these games will be seen around the world and send a message of resilience and unity.
As Mexico's team heads to Beijing 2022, they hope to inspire their country from the other side of the world. Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, Mexico City.
China's biggest holiday is a few weeks away, and the lions are right behind. Lion dancing is a traditional art form performed at the Lunar New Year and other festivals. The dance is believed to bring good luck and ward off evil spirits, but it takes teamwork. CGTN's Chao Bing met a professional lion dance troupe in Guangdong to find out how they train their young dancers.
With boisterous sound of drums and gongs, a lion, handled by a pair of performers, makes synchronized movements to the beat, leaping and thrusting his head high on the iron Meihua poles. This is a performance by 2-century-old lion dance troupe, Bilintang. They have been performing this for years to bring joy, excitement, and good fortune.
Wow, look at this cute giant lion's face. I will try to put it on. Ooh. Here we are. If I pull a string inside, as you can see, it will make the blink of the eyes. And if I push the jaw, it will help the lion close his mouth.
But according to the chief coach of the troupe, the performance is not only about moving a lion's face mask. It also needs acrobatic skills for which performers undergo difficult training.
Look at these Meihua poles. The lowest one is 1.2 meters high and the tallest 2.5 meters. Performers need years of kung fu practice to have nice and steady movements.
He says despite the hardships, Bilintang has attracted many young people. The troupe organized line dance classes at vocational high schools, enrolling students and allowing them to study and train as line dancers at the same time. 14-year-old student Liu Jianyong is the youngest trainee of the troupe.
I decided to start lion dancing at the age of 10 when I saw a performance in my village. I first practiced at school communities and holiday classes. Now I'm a lion dance student at vocational high school. Honestly, many of my fellow students stopped halfway, but I decided to continue. Last year I won the 6th place with my partner in the Chinese National Lion Dance competition.
The performance is also popular among girls.
We play drum and gong. Even if we can't perform the difficult ira pole movements, we can still play the bass rhythm, which is an indispensable part of a good performance. It's the soul of it.
They have also started a short video channel on social media, introducing their art to more people. The chief coach says lion dance is more than just a performance.
Chinese lion dance is an intangible cultural heritage. It teaches our members to have perseverance and be brave. It tells them to never give up, no matter what difficulties they face.
As the lion dances with energy and grace, the young dancers themselves are writing up their own stories of bravery and growth. Cao Bing, CGTN, Foshan, Guangdong Province.
Our main stories again. Let us join NATO. Ukraine's former president calls for fast-track membership to the defence bloc amid escalating tension with Russia. Djokovic loses his match with Australia. The world's tennis #1 is deported, missing the Australian Open. And Tonga residents assess damage after tsunami wreaked havoc to the Pacific nation. And that's the world today. Thanks for watching. We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app. And in the UK, 24 hours a day on Freeview. Stay tuned for more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, though, it's Razor. It's a good one. For now, more the team here in London. Goodbye.